Well, today I'm with my friend Mike Weider. He's the CEO and co-founder of Frugal AI. And Frugal AI's mission is to empower developers to reduce the cost of applications. They envision a future where cloud efficiency is built into the DNA of every application, where development speed and cost optimization are no longer at odds. So, Mike, it's great to have you today.
Hey, Walter, happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, can you start out by talking about the major pain point that you're solving in the market?
Sure, yeah. So anybody who is building software today is probably going to be familiar with painful cloud bills. Everybody, most startups are paying at least $1 in $10 they bring in revenue. They're handing over to Amazon, Google, or Azure to host their applications. And now with AI becoming prolific in everybody's applications, those costs are going even higher. So typically, the gross margins of a SaaS company on average are about 80%. And of that, half of that gross margin is related to cloud costs. With AI native companies, the average gross margins are more like 50 to 70%. And so those costs that were kind of painful have gotten now almost existential. And so what we're helping customers do is to make their code more efficient.
Mhm.
And so most people by now, if they're spending a decent amount on cloud, probably have good measurement. You know what you're spending. But probably where you're suffering is that you need your engineers to take action to optimize the applications. And that's where things get tough because you run into the obstacles that, well, you're trying to ship features, you're trying to help customers, and nobody ever has time to look at cost. And so that's where we come in. We're trying to help you automate that by building basically a AI cost engineer that kind of does this 24/7 on behalf of your dev team.
Cool. Now, most cloud optimization, cost optimization tools focus on the infrastructure. You guys do it differently. You're focusing on the code. So, can you talk just a little bit more about your uniqueness there?
Yeah, for sure. So probably first thing most people would do, as I said, they're going to build a dashboard. They're going to try and get visibility. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to negotiate with Amazon for savings plans or GCP for what's called CUDs. But basically, you're not really changing how much you're consuming, but you're making a commitment to them to say, "Hey, I'll sign up for 2 years if you give me 10 or 15 points off my bill."
Mm.
And so that's what 90% of companies are doing today. The next tier gets into really optimization, where I'm trying to actually reduce the bills. And so that, what people have focused on in the past is kind of looking at servers and saying, hey, you stood up this server, but nobody's actually using it,
Hmm.
but you're paying the bill. And so there are tools to help you find those things and shut them down. What we're doing is taking it to the next level, which is actually getting into the actual code and looking at how the code is utilizing various services, spending on AI, spending on storage, spending on messaging, spending on data dogs, whatever the code is using. Basically, your code is writing, is controlling spend. And so what we're helping to do is find where the code is spending money on these various services. And we make optimizations to that code to reduce the amount of consumption of those services without impacting functionality and thereby reducing the bill.
Got it. And does the question come up about slowing down engineers? Because you talked about speed, efficiency, cost optimization. How does that come into the conversation, and what are people's responses, and how do you tackle that as far as like slowing down the engineers themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. Basically, we insert ourselves into the development process in three places. So we integrate with other AI coding agents to give them cost context, such that they generate more efficient code by default. That's kind of invisible to you. You just enable the skill, and all of a sudden, your engineers, are producing better code. The second point is part of the PR process or pull request process. So before developers put code into production, they check it into GitHub and create a pull request. We attach to that process and we tell them three things. One is, what are you spending today on this piece of software you're writing? Two, what is the code change you're proposing? How is that going to change the cost profile? And thirdly, what are some recommendations to reduce that? And what we found is that by catching things early, it is way faster and easier to fix problems. And so that's just not the way it works today. What happens today is developers write code. They have no clue what the costs are. It's not that they don't care, it's just invisible to them,
Yeah.
right? And then it goes into production, and then you wait, and all of a sudden the bills show up, and the CFO is kind of banging on the door saying, "Hey, these costs are out of control. Let's put some energy into fixing those things." And so it's very much a reactive process. And so what we're trying to do is make it proactive, and it takes a very little amount of the time because we already done all the research to understand what's the optimization. Is it, how much is it going to save you? Are there any side effects? And basically we serve up the code changes to them. They need to review those and approve those. It doesn't happen automatically, but that's vastly simpler and easier than asking you to stop what you're doing and start a new process to go and dig around in the code and figure out how to save money, which is a major effort. So our sort of thesis is that developers kind of want, obviously they want to do the right thing. They want to save their company's money, but we need to make it super easy. And that's what we're trying to do. Right.
So yeah, so it doesn't take much of the bandwidth or attention of the developer. Do they actually get better at producing code that's more cost efficient, or is it kind of just they just rely on the tool practice, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of both, right? Where right now, most of the devs, as we said, are kind of blind to the costs, and we're helping to provide visibility. And so now all of a sudden, I'm aware, oh, this thing is spending that much money. Wow, I had no idea. And just by telling them that, that's actually adding some value there because now I'm aware, especially if you're working on, a hot path of the code that gets a lot of usage. Some just whatever services that it's going to use are going to add up to some real costs. So they're becoming more cost aware, and then but there's a lot of kind of complicated math that goes on. These, cloud sounds simple, it's very easy to get started, but it's very easy to spend a lot of money really fast, right? And developers, like, just take a simple thing like storage, for example. There's many different ways of storing things on Amazon, each of which have different storage rates and different read write costs and so forth, and some developers got to do the math of all that. And you may
Hmm.
make the right decision today, but then a year from now, when the usage pattern of this application changes, maybe that decision isn't the right one anymore, right? And so it requires someone going back repeatedly, reviewing choices that were made in the past and saying, is there a better answer today? And that's kind of what we're doing. So AI is kind of good at that stuff, that laborious work. And we're trying to, make that simpler and easier for people to, to action, and without really slowing developers down, and also without impacting any of the functionality of the app.
Got it. I heard you use the word cost traps before. And so what are the biggest cost traps that people are unaware of right now?
Yeah, I mean, so they vary by. So if you look at someone's bill, right, you're going to see different line items on that. Storage, everybody's using storage. Everybody's using a database. Everybody's using CPU, and then they're probably using AI now, and and they're probably using some kind of observability solution, whether it's CloudWatch or Datadog and so forth. So for each one of those services, there are a set of best practices for how to use them efficiently. And what we're doing is curating those smart best practices, and we are teaching our AI agent to look for those in your code. So we go through your code and say, oh, Walter's writing something that uses AI. Well, let's look at how he's using OpenAI or Anthropic or
Hmm.
whatever it is that you're using. And we're checking, did you follow all the best practices, or did you fall into what we call a cost trap, a mistake? So an example would be maybe accidentally making a more verbose prompt that you're giving to the AI than is necessary, and you're consuming more tokens than is required. Or it could be something really simple, like you're storing things in a uncompressed format, and if you compressed it, you reduce 80% of the storage fee. So sometimes it's not a complicated fix, but it's just knowing to look for all these things in the code. And again, that's part of what we optimize and automate, is growing this vast library and looking across every single service that you're using, and understanding whether you've made the right choice today as well as tomorrow. This, because it's a continuous process.
Now, would you say that AI native companies are using more cloud than the average tech company?
So definitely, their bills are going to be higher. And what I would say is they're at least using the same amount of cloud, but they have another cost on top of that, which
Hmm.
is all the tokens that they're consuming. And so that's why, the average SaaS company might be spending $1 and $10 on Amazon, but that's on the old stuff. Now they've got AI on top of that, and that's
Hmm.
why we're seeing a degradation of gross margins. I think another interesting economics issue for our whole industry is that, for the last 20 years of cloud, we've relied upon the assumption that the incremental cost of adding a customer is basically zero. So you did all the work up front, but then, adding that, turning on one more customer is basically a negligible cost, right? And that enabled things like freemium,
Hmm.
other, business models, try and buy, and so forth. Well, with AI, that's kind of different, right? Because the actual cost of serving a customer is now can be pretty significant. And so it's forcing everyone to rethink economics and rethink their pricing models, because a seat-based license, for example, in DevTools, well, what if my developer now has 20 AIs working alongside them? Well, they're consuming 20x the tokens versus someone who's not. So that's why everybody's moving to these usage-based pricing models. It's disrupting everything, and it's also forcing everybody to focus on cost, maybe in a bigger way. Like, if you were a hardware company, right, you'd be counting every penny that goes into your bill of
Hmm.
materials, because the incremental marginal cost of serving a customer is significant. Whereas in software, it had been basically zero, so no one had to care, and now they have to care.
Well, who's the ideal customer profile for you guys?
So we sell to mostly other technology companies, ranging from startups to large enterprises that are building, anyone who's building cloud-based software, deploying, whether it's AI or traditional workloads, but they're using Amazon GCP or Azure in some meaningful way, typically minimally like $1 million a year in spend and up. Um, and we would help typically a CTO or VP of engineering to embed a cost review into their development process. We would also work sometimes with the finance group, and there's this new role called FinOps, which is fast growing. Basically, every Fortune 500 company will now have a FinOps person, and they've been tagged with the responsibility of wrangling these cloud bills down. So there's approximately 85,000 FinOps professionals now in the world. So it's a kind of a new profession, but that was basically zero, 4 or 5 years ago. So it's really growing fast.
Thinking of a customer success story, is there one on the top of your mind where you can think about the savings that you achieved?
Yeah, I mean, there was a customer just the other day that we were working with, and they had they were spending a lot of money on storage. They do a lot of videos, and so their storage bill was very significant. And we were able to find a cost trap, in their code that was costing them, I think it was 55,000 a month in extra costs, which really didn't need to be there. And so that's 600K a year for a company that was very significant to them, given their size. And we think these types of cost traps exist in everybody's code base. So there's at least 10 to 20% savings that everybody could enjoy if they began to sort of look at their code more carefully. And we think we're just getting started here.
Wow. So talking about security and SOC 2, can you mention a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we understood right from the get-go. So half of our dev team comes from Sneak and other code security companies. We're well steeped in the background of security and how to build enterprise grade secure systems. But we also knew that this was going to be a hot button for all of our customers, and so we engineered this from scratch to be extremely security conscious. And because we're asking for we need access to three things: your code, your costs, and observability metrics. And we use that to create our models and to power our system. And so that's very sensitive information that organizations are going to be very careful about giving access to. So we've obviously done the SOC 2 stuff. But we've really engineered this in a different way than most SaaS companies. So it's not a multi-tenant system like most SaaS. We operate in a segregated single tenant environment where your data is protected from and segregated from everybody else's. And our AI operates in a sandbox and ensures that there's no training on your data, your code. So we've done a huge amount of effort to engineer this from scratch so that we can pass these incredibly rigorous security reviews that will go on in every customer before we're given access to their code.
Amazing. Well, how should people learn more if they wanted to learn more? How should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is frugal.co. And on there, there's videos kind of walking through the product, but also there's a little sandbox where you can jump in and actually check out our application on a sample code base, and sort of get a view of what Frugal is about. And we also run trials with customers that they can sign up on the website and try it out on their own applications.
Cool. Well, Mike, this has been really exciting learning about your solution at Frugal AI, and I just look forward to watching the company grow and seeing the product adoption.
Thanks, Walter. Really appreciate you having us on. It's great.
Awesome. Awesome.